Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, no matter what time it is. Welcome to the Three Rivers Podcast, the podcast where we take a close look at what's going on in your council and talk to the people making it happen. Today, we are joined by someone who Three Rivers District Council works very closely with for many years now on a variety of community projects. That person is Bob Jones, the CEO of Watford and Three Rivers Trust, partly funded by Three Rivers District Council. The charity has been supporting and strengthening a lot of local voluntary and community organisations, as well as providing its own wellbeing services and community projects for more than 50 years. Bob joined the Trust in 2006, and after almost 20 years of dedicated service, he'll soon be leaving his role. During his time with the Trust, Bob has made an extraordinary contribution, strengthening community partnerships, leading with integrity, and supporting countless local initiatives that have made a lasting difference and impact to the communities. And joining us is the man himself, Bob. Hello, Bob. How's it going?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. Nice to see you.
Yeah, lovely to see you, and thanks for coming down. Much appreciated. So during my sort of brief introduction, I gave a sort of like a short description of Watford Three Rivers Trust. But can you please explain to our listeners what the charity is and what services it provides?
I can try. It's a very complex thing, really far more, but I'll try and keep it simple for everyone, including myself. I think W3RT originated as a CVS, which I think
What does that stand for?
The easiest way to it's a Council for Voluntary Service. Most areas of the country had a CVS, and they were mostly set up during the Second World War to coordinate volunteering and voluntary activity and civil defence forces and St John Ambulance, etc. During the war, they had a new burst of energy in the 1970s, and the best way of understanding them now is to think of them as a sort of a chamber of commerce, but for local charities and community groups. And as a CVS, we support local groups. We're like a chamber, we're a membership organisation. But in the last 15 years or so, we've, with partners from the sector, with other charities, we've started delivering and coordinating more and more services ourselves. So we run or have run community centres and youth projects and lunch clubs and daytime activities for older people. We've run transport schemes, all manner of volunteering and community projects. And most significantly, we also lead the governance and funding arrangements for something called social prescribing across Hertfordshire. So this isn't just about Three Rivers or Watford and Three Rivers, about the whole of the county. And it's a big contract for supporting adult care and NHS to make sure people can find their way to the right service and overcome any challenges they face.
So quite a lot that the charity does. That's been doing for 50 years. So you joined nearly 20 years ago. I'm just wondering what interests you in joining Watford Three Rivers Trust. What drew you into it to become its CEO?
Well, I'd always worked. I've worked my entire life in the charity sector, the community sector. So I'd recently relocated or returned to Hertfordshire after 20 years living in London. For all sorts of reasons, I'd returned to Hertfordshire to be closer to my family and so on, and was looking for a challenge and I loved the community work, really. The idea of working with one community and one small group of charities and people. And I had the technical background because, as I say, I'd worked in the charity sector by that point for 25 years or so. And I was really looking forward to see what I could do to help build community and build connections between people.
Yeah, and I think because like Three Rivers and Watford has such a strong community, you must have felt that whilst you've been working at the charity. Did you feel that before you joined? Like these areas really have a strong sense of community?
I did. I felt that Hertfordshire as a whole and Watford and Three Rivers particularly had a much stronger sense and not just stronger, but I think a more sensible approach to it than other areas I'd worked in. A lot of my work up to that point had been in London, which was, very very interesting, but it was just different. And Hertfordshire, because I was born and raised here, it was something I knew and understood better. And I think I understood how the different parts of the sector work together and how different parts of the community, and particularly the rurality, if you like, and the countryside areas of Three Rivers, particularly, I got to know quite well.
And just like in a sort of general sense, how do Three Rivers District Council, Watford Borough Council, and Watford Three Rivers Trust work in partnership? How do we work together?
There are, as you'd imagine, there's a whole range of different services and connections. I'd guess it's best when, I think, sharing intelligence and sharing information, sharing resources and expertise, making sure that all the different services, because the councils and of course also provide many services locally, making sure that people aren't treading on each other's toes too much and they're aware of what each other are doing and leaning into each other's strengths rather than duplicating or buffing up against each other to no purpose. So I think working on all those things can make everyone's lives easier and make get better value for money and better connections in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think example that I can sort of think of is during COVID times where us and the charity worked really closely together to not only to sort of set up a phone line for residents who needed support and coordinating volunteers, but also setting up a food hub at Three Rivers House to help distribute food to those who needed. So would you say COVID was sort of the biggest or one of the biggest challenges during your time?
It was certainly one of them. Yes. I think, it was an extraordinary time, and one of the things about the whole process was how strongly the community, how strongly and quickly the community came together. Obviously, it was an unprecedented public health emergency, and there were all sorts of things going on. But things just largely just snapped into place, and we were putting in place systems. One memory I've got is sitting up. It was about 2:30 in the morning. We were having a staff meeting, trying to get a database to work to receive requests for food or requests for visits or requests for people's medications running out. And we were working with our database developers and our IT team and our wellbeing team. And then I think there may even have been one of your colleagues on the call. I'm not sure, but that was an extraordinary response. I think we did very well in most cases. But there's other. You asked what the biggest challenge was, and that's one of them. But I think there's many other challenges we face all the time, and probably more prosaically or a more day-to-day challenge is just trying to get people to look to themselves. At that instant, people did. They looked to themselves and their neighbours, and they came together, and they were supported by council officers and councillors, elected councillors. But I think generally people are slipping back, communities slip back, and there's such a focus on, what's the council going to do about this? And, I've got a problem and I want the council to fix it or the government to fix it. And actually, I think the biggest challenge is continually saying to people, no, you can do this yourself. Obviously, there are some things we need to look to the councils for and the government for and the NHS for. But there's so much people can do themselves with their neighbours to sort out their own problems. And that, I think, is probably one of the biggest civilizational challenges we face right now.
Bit of an ambiguous question, but how do we do that?
I think it's empowering people. I think it's being more realistic about what government can and can't do. There's some brilliant things that Three Rivers Council's done, that Hertfordshire County Council's done, that government's done. But I think in the vast majority of cases, what works best is probably slightly less government and more community. People coming together themselves locally, and yes, they need help occasionally. Yes, we need to look for statutory support and for statutory funding on occasion. But there's so much more people can do locally between themselves, just supporting their neighbours.
Would it be the case of giving the people more resources to do that? Because back in like decades ago, they had. People had community centres to go to. Now we have less so people are more sort of isolated, stuck at their homes. So how do we sort of do that?
Yeah, well, I do think that's part of it, but I would hesitate to say it's simply a question of resource. It's a question certainly of opportunity and expectation. And I think that with so many cases, I mean, I'm certainly getting on a bit long in the tooth, shall I say. Growing up, if there was a problem locally, people sorted it out. It's the idea of the plural society or the pluralist society. And when I was young, people looked to their neighbours for help. They'd look to local charities and community groups. They'd look to their church or faith organisation. They'd look to their trade union for help. And there was lots of sources, and people owed different sort of allegiance to different things and different beliefs. And it was probably if people had a problem back in, when I was growing up in, say, the 1960s, probably the last person they'd think of to solve their problems would be the council or the government. And now I think it's the first port of call for everyone. Oh, there's a problem, we've got to get... there's got to be a council project or a government project to address it. And I think people being more realistic and saying, no, we're not the best people to do this, and throwing money at a problem doesn't necessarily provide a long-term solution. It's got to be. There's been some marvellous work on this around something called asset-based community development, which is working with. Instead of focusing on what's wrong in a community, looking at what's strong in a community and how we can build those connections between different people. And there was, I read a lot of theory on community building. I'm afraid I'm a bit of a nerd, as you'd expect after 45 years. There's a marvellous man called Robert Nisbet who wrote books about recapturing sense of community and about preserving a plural range, traditionally liberal communities with a broad range of different sources of power, I suppose, and sources of support and help. So I think trying to recapture and revitalise a plural society with multiple people all helping each other and all sharing things is a marvellous thing to do if we can do it, but I recognise that's a lot easier said than done.
So you mentioned all that. The cost of living, has that made an impact of people sort of dipping, like they don't really have the money or time to give to other people or to communities?
It certainly has, and the cost of living, the current or most recent cost of living crisis has certainly had a big impact, but I'd also say the whole nature of volunteering has changed. People are less likely to join an organisation or to sign up for a long-term formal volunteering role. It used to be, fairly recently, it used to be that volunteering was something very much like applying for a job when you were retired, or if you didn't need or couldn't get a paid job, you would volunteer, and there were application processes and interviews and training programs and so on, and that still exists. But I think the younger generation very much, the whole concept of volunteering has been transformed. Is it volunteering or is it campaigning, or championing a particular cause or a particular need? There's all, and so much of it now is virtual volunteering or ad hoc volunteering, and I think we've got to get more and more opportunities. And I think that's more about connections and opportunities and information than it is about the cost of living. And of course, the cost of living crisis was fueled partly by the consequences of COVID and the lockdown in COVID, partly by one of the many public finance crises we've had, partly by the invasion of Ukraine, which was a terrible disaster for everybody. And I think all these things come in, but I think despite all of that, there was the inflation rate shot up. There was real poverty and need, and people were facing great pressures. But on the whole, mainly things get better each year, even if they don't get better much. I think yes, we're stagnant. We're not delivering growth. We're not, cost of public borrowing's going up, and these are all important things, but they don't stop people coming together. That's about opportunity and connection and expectation. So I think it's more to do with culture than it is to do with the economy in most cases.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, I'd say. Just because we're slightly running out of time, what has been your proudest accomplishment / achievements at Watford Three Rivers Trust?
Oh my. I would say, I tend not to think of my own, and nor would I claim responsibility or plaudits for anything. It's really, I would guess it's the organisation and the people and the community that achieve things. Occasionally I'm privileged enough to be able to help, but mostly it's other people that do the work. And I would say probably the staff team and working with the community, and so, COVID was a big one, but there's many others. I think despite everything I've said, there is a need. People do need resources, and I've looking back over my 20 odd years, I think I've raised something like £35 million for Watford and Three Rivers over that time.
That's amazing.
That in for local voluntary organisations to do things. So that's that's a good thing. But I say I've done it, but I haven't done it single-handedly. I've had a marvellous team of staff and volunteers and partners. And I think one of the things we have been good at is shifting the ground a little, because we are so committed to working in partnership with other voluntary organisations and also with councils and councillors, and recognising that everyone has, part of championing a plural society is recognising that you're only one among many organisations and many people that are contributing. So that's what we've always done, and I like to think, if anything, we've shifted the ground a little bit there and got more people thinking and working in partnership.
The staff, the volunteers, the communities, is that what you'll miss the most?
I think so, and I think that as I've worked with so many staff, I think one of my colleagues told me the other day that over the years we've had 250 different members of staff, over the last 20 years, and virtually all of them I remember. I can still put faces and names and remember people very fondly, and many of them I still keep in touch with. So that's been wonderful. And I think also being able to have a degree of influence and seeing the outcomes of what you do. So often in a big organisation or a larger organisation, it's very difficult to draw the line between a connection between what you do and what benefit somebody gets from it. And I think in the charity sector, that's generally easier.
And finally, what's in store for you next, Bob, after you leave Watford Free Rivers Trust? What's next in your chapter?
Well, it's to an extent, it's just more of the same, James. I've got a few projects. I'm doing a bit more writing on community. I'm setting up with others. I'm setting up a charity in Hertfordshire to work with the smallest groups in Hertfordshire, the smallest voluntary organisations, and particularly to champion the great number of artists and craftspeople we've got in Hertfordshire as well. So I'll be working on those, and I'm also working with 2 international groups to set up UK charity bodies to represent particular schools of approach to community work and voluntary work and mental health in one case. So I'll be very busy doing what I know, always meeting new people and always, I hope, learning more and more.
Yes, about to say, it sounds like you'll still be as busy as ever. But yeah, well, best of luck with everything on that. So, I mean, I'm sure you'll be dearly missed at Watford Free Rivers Trust. I mean, leveraging that 35 million over the years is just a huge achievement, I'd say. Obviously, I know it wasn't just you; it was many other people. Just to reiterate, but still, like,
thank you on their behalf.
Yes. But no, thank you so much for joining us, Bob. And it's a thank you from Free Rivers District Council as well.
I will keep visiting and keep watching with interest how the communities develop and come together over the years ahead. So thank you very much.
No worries. Thank you so
nice
much.
Talking.
Thank you, Bob. Volunteering, no matter how small, can make a big difference to a local community and is extremely rewarding and sociable while boosting your own skills and experiences. If you feel inspired to volunteer, please check out the Watford Free Rivers Trust website. That's www.wfreert.org. Or check out the main volunteering site in Hertfordshire. That's www.govolhearts.org.uk to find a diverse range of roles across the county.